before we get really deep into our conversation, talk to me about how the race came about, and also it's essentially the legacy of Mike Hall, isn't it? So just to set a real important context for the Transcontinental for us, just explain about how it came about.
Okay, so Mike Hall started the race. He sort of came up with the concept in 2012 when he was racing around the world. He got the record for fastest unsupported rider around the world. And his first stage from London to Istanbul, the first sort of section of his race, as he was riding it, he was sort of thinking to himself that, you know, like the experience he was taking on was something that most people couldn't really do. You know, you need a lot of finance, you need a lot of time off work, maybe away from family and everything. But that stage that he was doing, that first leg, was 2 weeks. And that is something that everybody could access, you know, within reason. Yeah. So, so he sort of dreamt it up on that in 2012, and both 2013, the TCR was happening. So, yeah. And
your involvement at that point, what was it? What did you think about this concept, this idea? What were your thoughts on it? Because it is something. There's nothing else quite like it, is there? Because it really is. It's beautiful, but it's intrinsically brutal as well.
Yes. So I'm not particularly. I mean, I have a bike and I love cycling, but I'm not a racer and I'm not an ultra-distance cyclist. I was Mike's girlfriend, and he was sort of, you know, I was obviously amazed and impressed by what he could do, and I loved watching his dot on the, you know, Tour Divide and everything. And I just wanted to spend time with him, really. So I was like, well, I can help out a bit and spend some time with him. And then obviously the more involved I got, the more involved the community I got, the more sort of close I felt to everyone and passionate I felt about it. And so that's why I'm still here, really. I absolutely love it.
You can tell, just there's that twinkle in your eye when you talk about it with real passion. Nikki, you just made it, didn't you? We literally just met 2 seconds ago. You nearly didn't make it. Lovely that you're here. But Nikki, you've ridden the Transcontinental, but you're also one of the volunteers. So just explain a little bit about your role and what exactly you do, what you facilitate, and how embedded you are in the event itself.
So I originally applied to be a volunteer in 2015 for the following year's race, so TCR number 4. At that point, I was sort of hooked on the idea of the race. It'd been running for a few years, and it was sort of a long-term aim to go and do the race myself. But obviously, it's quite a big thing to take on. So it was just a stepping stone to doing the race, and having that experience as a volunteer, it really gives you that experience without having to do the race itself. So you get a really good idea of what the riders go through. And I had my own adventure to checkpoint number 4 in Montenegro as well. So I did a fast tour across Europe, taking in a few of the checkpoints. So I was sort of like having my own race. I set off a week before the race started, so that I could have time to get there in time for when the race passed through. So yeah, it was an invaluable experience, to be honest, to have that volunteer experience. And then the following year, going into the race itself, I just felt a lot more confident and knew what I was letting myself in for.
Did you really know what you were letting yourself in for, though?
I know, I don't think you do until you actually put yourself in those racing shoes. You have to experience it for yourself. So, just
before we chat with Ben and Josh, and what we haven't done is just explain what it is. We've got a sense of it and how it came about. But just specifically, just explain what it is and what the riders have got to do and how they've got to do it briefly before we move on to lads who've won this. Well, one of them has won it, second place, and have done it multiple times. So just set the scene for us. What exactly does the Transcontinental entail?
Okay. So it's a single stage race, so there's no stop and start. The clock never stops. The riders all start together. Traditionally, we've started in Geraardsbergen in Belgium, and they have 4 control points they have to reach. We don't set a route, so the riders have to plan their own route. So it's why we sort of advertised the race in November the year before, were going to race because they need enough time to, it does take a long time to plan your route across Europe, of course. So part of the race is obviously, can you cycle 4,000 kilometres across Europe?
That's a key component part, yes.
That's a part of it.
Yep, that's
and part
important.
of it is, can you plan a good route across Europe? I mean,
that's map-tastic, isn't it? I mean, if you like maps, this is for you, isn't it? Imagine if this was done in the olden days, how many maps you'd have to carry with you. You'd have to have a separate rider with a map kind of trolley behind. But just move on to the Ben. You've won the Transcontinental. No, sorry, Ben, you've won the Transcontinental. I've got the names right. Josh. What? I'll get my names right eventually. What is it like from the planning stage? What is it? What do you have to do? Because that's insane. I mean, the principle is quite clear, isn't it? But when you to sew a route together that's, especially if you want to compete to try and win it, it's got to be a route that's quick and direct. But obviously, you don't want to go on main roads as well. So how do you plan and how do you strategize and how long does that actually take?
Well, to be honest, so I've raced the TCR 3 times, and each time you sort of learn a lot about the route planning, and it becomes a lot easier. It is a race across Europe, but there's only so many routes that you can take, really. So you build up a picture in your head of what works. There's a number of bits that you do consider, because there's always the balancing act between elevation gain and distance. So maybe you're quicker to go a longer route, but climb less, and that kind of thing. So there's all of these kind of different facets that you put together and learn from. To be honest, I'm one of these people that leaves it very much to the last minute. And
is it like cramming for an exam? You know you've got it next week,
absolutely.
and so well, I better plan a route, I suppose.
The way I sell it to myself is then it's fresh in my head. So once I'm actually racing, it's all good.
Fair enough. And Josh, what's actually like the from a physical perspective, preparation-wise? Then, how do you clearly can't just ride 4,000 k straight off the bat, and you obviously do other enduro events. So, from a physiological point of view, would you do anything different preparing for an event like this? What would that comprise of?
To be honest, you've just got to get as fit as you can.
Right.
And that's your kind of, your base level. Then it's your head that keeps you going. So for me, I train as if I'd probably be, training for a road race or something like that. Just, get as aerobically fit as you can. And then, the higher your kind of threshold is essentially, the higher everything else is. And then you've just got to be able to stay steady all the time for 8, 9, 10 days. And it's just keeping it kind of level, not going too hard, just saving energy all the time, keep eating. It's just management, really.
And typically, on the time that you actually want it, how much did you sleep out of that time? How much sleep do you do? And the sleep deprivation side of it is for me, is a fascinating one. We all love our beds, but there's no bed, because you're not allowed to, one of the rules is you're not allowed to stay in any lodgings. You have to be completely self-sufficient, don't you? So what about the sleep deprivation side? Can you train for that?
Kind of. I mean, I find the best thing to do is get in a routine. So try and go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time every morning. It might only be 3 or 4 hours you sleep, but you kind of get used to it a little bit, and for 10 days, your body can kind of cope with it. After that, it's quite a sharp drop-off, but I don't know, you can almost train yourself for it.
But it's one of these things, you'll see different riders and everyone has a different approach to it. So you are allowed to stay in hotels if you choose. Basically, there's a rule that anything that's commercially available to everyone else, you can do. So if you want to, you can stay in a hotel. And again, it's this thing, so you'll see some people, they'll have a strategy where they go to a hotel, and the argument would be that you can get a better quality of sleep in a hotel bed for some people. Other people take the strategy of bivvy on the side of the road or in a bus shelter, whatever. And to be honest, that's what I've done on every...
It must be within the spirit of it. I'd imagine Mike wouldn't have really fancied people staying in hotels much, would he? It'd have been more... Because I guess it's... If you want to win it, there's a really specific strategy. But if you want to enjoy it, or if you want to just do it in a fashion, in a way, in a manner that would embody the spirit of the event, hotels shouldn't be really available, should they?
I think the idea you know, the interesting thing about the race is that everybody races it in their way
Yeah.
and the way that suits them.
Yeah.
And the hotel thing, you know, like Ben was saying, you know, maybe you can get a better quality night's sleep in a bed, but there's a lot of faffing time. There's a lot of time where you've obviously got to check in, you've got to be polite to people, you've got to pay.
Got to be polite to people. I like that. I love that that's one of your concerns. How weird is that?
Maybe try and be polite to people.
Yeah.
But, you know, otherwise you can just throw down a bivvy bag behind a bush and get a couple of hours there and pack it away, and you've lost 10 minutes. Whereas, you know, if you're checking into a hotel and all of that stuff, that's quickly adds up time-wise.
We're talking about the spirit of how to do what you can and can't do, and there are some rules, aren't there? And I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you all the rules, but there are only 10. There's only 10 rules, and I picked out rule number 2 in particular because I think it's a fascinating one. No third-party support or lodgings or resupply. So to Nikki, what's this resupply bit? Because do you have to forage for mushrooms, or can you go to the garage and get a Snickers and a bag of McCoys? What's the vibe?
I mean, if you wanted to forage for mushrooms, then and wild berries and whatever, then I don't think that's a great nutrition strategy. You could actually do that if you wanted to, because it's commercially available to everyone. Anyone could choose to do that. I think the resupply thing is more to do with having that pre-planned resupply. So if you arrange for someone to be down the road and have some resupply for you to collect on the road, then that's obviously not commercially available to everyone.
Right.
So it's keeping it simple, really.
What's the most unorthodox and strange thing that you've had to eat because everything was shut, or you were at the end of your tether? Have you foraged?
I've not, no, not yet, but it's just a matter of time, isn't it, before I get that desperate. I can only think of like recent experiences, really. So I've recently done a race in Italy a couple of weeks ago, 2 volcano sprint, and down in the south of Italy, it's surprisingly difficult to get food at certain times of the day on a Sunday.
It's
a bit like France on a
quite
Sunday.
a lot of the time. Italy's just basically closed, isn't it?
Closed.
I mean, I love the place. Don't get me
closed.
wrong. It's shut a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
I would find myself in a bar with sort of a row of iced tea and then just sort of 10 packets of crisps and peanuts and anything that you can get that's just going to give you those calories to keep on going when you can't get the proper meal. Which becomes a bit of a luxury actually sometimes on a race. So it's always it's nice to at the end of the race to enjoy that warm food again.
Ben, are you a hotel person? You don't look like a hotel. You look like you might be a hotel person today. I didn't mean to. That was a bit. Oh, that was awkward, wasn't it? Oh God. I've already insulted him about saying that I don't think carbon fibre had a soul earlier on, and he works in the industry. So that was awkward. So Ben, where's the weirdest place or the strangest place that you've slept?
Oh man, I think it's literally every night is something a bit different, but it's... So I do remember one night, I think it was the first night of my first TCR, and it was just, the place wasn't too hard, so it was just in a field, at the side of the road, and I woke up with a slug on my forehead. And, but it's, you sort of start to learn different places that are good. So I probably shouldn't say this, but churchyards, brilliant. You don't get bothered there. Bus shelters, that's the traditional All Dax hotel, so they're all good. I mean, it's the sort of thing, as long as you're respectful, and generally you're rocking up super late, you're there for a couple of hours. As long as you're not bothering anyone, anything pretty much goes. So you can find yourself in some pretty odd places.
And the self-support side of things, back to you, Josh, now, from a mechanical point of view. I mean, you've got to know your way around a bike. Are you allowed to take it? Does the commercial side of things allow you to go and get your bike repaired if you're really struggling? Because we're not talking about pre-First World War Tour de France kind of vibes here, are we? You can actually go to a bike shop, I guess.
Yeah, like if it's commercially available, i.e. a shop, then yeah, as long as it's available to everyone, you can do it. You couldn't sort of ring your mate and he drives down and mend your bike for you. But essentially, you need to know your bike. You need to be able to fix it because, you're not going to have a mechanical right near a bike shop.
So, in that regard, Tell us what you'd carry on your bike then. Okay, next year, what would you be loading up with? Tools, clothing, bedding. What would you have? Because there's a lot of things you need, but also you don't want to take any extraneous things either. So I guess that's quite focused and tactical amongst different people as well. So what would you take?
I'd probably go as light as possible.
Yep.
So 2015, I had a pair of shorts, a jersey.
A pair of shorts.
It was a bad choice. I now take 2 pairs of shorts. A set of waterproof shorts, a rain jacket, and a bivvy bag. I take more stuff now. I was a bit young and naive then. It was a pretty miserable experience, to be fair.
Right. And what about? So, are you running? Would you run tubeless, or would you take inner tubes? Or would you take obviously a spare tyre with you? So, from a mechanical point of view, what backup would you have on board?
I'd take the basics, so I'd run tubeless, so I'd take like a plug kit, a couple of spare tubes, maybe a spare cable for gears, or a Di2 cable, and brake pads, and that's about it really. On the road, it's a bit kind of easier to sort yourself out if you need to, because you can get places. But for like an off-road race, like maybe Tour de Vide, where you're more remote, you really need to be able to sort yourself out. So I'd take a bit more for that kind of thing.
And what about lighting? I mean, obviously, like LEDs and stuff last for ages now. And I'll throw this one out to Nikki. I mean, it's clearly an amazing adventure, but it must be quite stressful, and it can be very dangerous as well. So in terms of riding through the night, how did you manage that, and what routes did you pick? Because clearly, if you need to be riding for as long as you can each day with sleep, and you're going to be riding in the dark a lot. So how did you manage that side of things?
Yeah, obviously you have to be confident riding at night, riding through the night, and wearing a high vis is compulsory on the race. So you'll see everyone doing that. Obviously having lights, front and rear lights are really important. I think it comes down to personal choice again. So the 2 strategies would be to have either a dynamo, a front wheel dynamo, so you've got that constant energy supply there, or you just take battery packs, and it's sort of like a weight management issue. The battery pack is probably going to be a heavier option, but it sort of ties into the sleep strategy as well. So if you're planning on doing hotel stops, you can make use of those stops to charge everything up and go on your way. So that's personally what I like to do. I like to do a sort of mixture of hotels, so stop in hotels maybe every 2nd or 3rd night, and just have a chance to get everything charged up, so that will see me through for the next sort of 2 nights.
So, Anna, just explain about the checkpoint, because the checkpoint, so it's the start and the finish, and there's 4 checkpoints. And that's the only thing that the riders have to do, isn't it? Basically, is get from A to B, self-sufficient, but they have to go via these checkpoints. So when you're planning the Transcontinental, how devilish are you? How do you make a call? So we've got number 8, all being well. It's been cancelled a couple of times. So how do you? I mean, what's the route looking like? This is next year, isn't it? This is Transcontinental 8. How did you come up with this nefarious route?
I think Anna just throws some darts at a map. And then that's what we have to go with. So
yeah, more or less. It's a mixture. It's mostly places that we just have captured our imagination, places we want to go. Just it's a mixture of stunning, beautiful places that are really kind of connected to cycling history. Places that people have said to me at a party 2 years ago, or whatever, and it's stuck in my mind, and just a mixture of places, and then obviously we have to then arrange it so that it works within the distance. There's certain places that you might want the riders to avoid a bit, where there's very busy roads and things. So obviously we've got safety in mind when we're planning. So yeah, we just kind of try and sort of mash it all together, and eventually you come up with something.
So thanks very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen.